Well, we've certainly learned a lot these last few weeks. If you're like me, when the world first started waking up to the reality of coronavirus and how we might keep from infecting ourselves and others, one of the things that I learned was how often I touch my face. Because as soon as the word came out, don't touch your face, I realized I'm always touching my face. So that's one thing I've learned, and as we've begun to stay at home more and more and eat at home more and more, a lot of us are learning how many dishes it takes to feed a family when you're eating every meal at home. We are doing dishes constantly, and judging on Facebook and Twitter and just about everywhere else, everybody else is learning this lesson as well. We're learning how much it is that we're used to being able to go outside and how much we've taken that for granted. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot about how important it is to have a good infrastructure that keeps delivering the goods and food that we need to be safe and healthy. We've learned how important it is to have a responsive, thoughtful, prepared government for these kinds of crises. We've learned how much it is that the people that we often pay the least and who get the fewest benefits and who are most insecure in terms of their job are some of the most important people in our community. The folks that stock our grocery shelves or who take the trash or who keep our water clean. We've learned a lot. Some of these are things that are new, and so we're learning them because they're new. And some of the things that we're learning are things that are being revealed. Things that were there and true all along, we just hadn't noticed. One of the things that's being revealed, I think, is how much it is that companies who say they value their customers and their employees, it's being revealed who it is that really means that and who it is for whom it's really just a slogan, because it's been hard for companies, hasn't it? And we've seen layoffs, and we've seen people who've had hours cut, and we've seen other companies who've responded to try and find ways to care for their employees. And I know that there's no one easy answer for large companies in all these cases. But it certainly is revealing something about the values that those companies hold. It's revealing something about the values that we as people and as organizations and as communities hold. This is the last of our 5-week series on Lent and about the vow of membership that we make as United Methodists. That when you join a United Methodist congregation, you commit your prayers, your presence, your gifts, your service, and since 2008, I think, your witness. And for a lot of us, that word, not only because it's one that's been added in the last and living memory, but that it's not one we talk about a lot. Witness, what does that even mean? In some ways, it is a revealing of what we say and believe. It's revealed in how we act. We bear witness to the things that we profess by what we do. Or perhaps more accurately, we reveal what we really believe by what we do. We bear witness to the things that we most value in the way that we invest our time and our money and our lives. So witness is partly a revealing and a showing. Jesus has gathered the crowd. They're on top of a hill or a mountain in what is now known as the Sermon on the Mount in that passage from Matthew's Gospel. And he looks at the gathered folks, and these were not politicians or cultural leaders. These were just the everyday folks. And he said, you are the salt of the earth. You are a light for the world. You're like a city on a hill that cannot be hidden. In essence, he's saying to them, you are a witness. You reveal the kingdom and the lives that you live. And some of us feel really uncomfortable with that idea. I often feel really uncomfortable with that idea. I remember I saw a shirt once that said, if you can't be a great example, be a horrible warning. And I think most of us feel like we're probably better at being horrible warnings than we are at being great examples. But Jesus doesn't call us to be horrible warnings. He calls us to be witnesses to the work of God in our world. Sometimes we respond and react to that word, witness, because we imagine it means we have to go knock on our neighbor's door and try and drag them into church, or tell them how what we believe is so much better than what they believe. But that is not, I don't think, what Jesus is asking us to do. He's asking us to let our lives shine with the goodness and love of God. Now, some of us are finding a moment of relief in this. The idea that we can just be examples and we don't have to really talk about it. We don't have to tell anybody about our faith. I have bad news. Because the reality is that we are also called to talk about the things that we believe. That letter that Peter writes to the church, he talks a lot about living in the midst of strain and stress and suffering. Living out of step with the world around you, even. Being patient and kind and humble and gentle. And then he says, right at the end, and I hope you caught this, he says, and be ready to explain to people why it is that you are the way you are. Be ready to make a defense for the hope that you have. Because somebody's going to ask, how can you be hopeful at a time like this? How can you be gentle at a time like this? Shouldn't you take care of yourself first? And Peter says to the church, be ready to help them understand what it is that we believe and why. So we don't have to go knock on our neighbors' doors to tell them about who we believe Jesus to be and who Jesus calls us to be, but we do have to be ready to answer when people ask, to bear witness to the good news that has so shaped our lives. I don't know if you saw this in the news, but just a few days ago, Brother Joseph Lowry, Reverend Joseph Lowry, passed away. He was in his 90s. He had been one of the key leaders of the civil rights movement in this country. He was the third president of the Southern Christian leadership. He was one of the key assistants to Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. He was also, as you might remember, involved in President Barack Obama's inauguration. He gave the benediction at the end. And he was a United Methodist pastor. And when you asked him, when people would interview and ask him about the work he didn't have to knock them down and say, well, let me tell you about Jesus. His life shone forth, his call to justice-making and peacemaking in our world. He talked easily about his faith. He talked comfortably about who he understood Jesus to be, but he didn't have to knock on anybody's door to do that. His life bore witness to the love of God. Now, you and I are not going to be Joseph Lowry, but we are called to be who we are, bearing witness to the world of the love and the good news around us. And at a time like this, it is even more important, church, that we bear witness to the goodness of God. The church should be the folks who are leading the way in caring for our community and our neighbors. The church should bear witness to the love of God in the way that we respond in the midst of crisis, not with fear, but with courage. Not with despair, but with hope. The day is coming when we will gather once again. And I yearn for that day. But we don't have to wait for that day to celebrate and to share the good news together. We are called to bear witness, to let our lives shine out. This is not the first crisis in the life of the church, as you know, and it's not the last. But it has often been true that in these moments, these are the moments when our faith and when people of faith most often bear witness to the God we serve. So my hope and my prayer for you, for all of us, is that we will be witnesses to the unfailing, undying, always new love of God. And that, my friends, is God's good news this day. Thanks be to God. Amen.